Good morning, everybody. I'd like to just introduce myself. My name's Graham, for those who don't know me, and I'd like to also apologise for the lockdown hairstyle. I've been asked to look at the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem from Luke 19. And I'll just read the relevant part of that passage. As he approached Bethphage and Bethany at the hill called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you untying it?' say, 'The Lord needs it.'" Those who were sent ahead went and found it just as he had told them. As they were untying the colt, its owners asked them, "Why are you untying the colt?" And they replied, "The Lord needs it." They brought it to Jesus, threw their cloaks on the colt, and put Jesus on it. As he went along, people spread their cloaks on the road. When he came near the place where the road goes down the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in loud voices for all the miracles they had seen. "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." "I tell you," he replied, "if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out." As I've been looking at these words in the passage, I've really been drawn for some reason to just looking at the different responses that people had to Jesus in this story, and what lessons there might be for us. Firstly, the two disciples who Jesus sent to get the colt. And I don't know about you, but if that was me in that position, I'd have a lot of questions. Would the people know that we were coming? Had Jesus prearranged the loan of the colt? Or was it just that Jesus' all-knowing nature just knew that it would be there and available for him? I'd be asking whether health and safety issues on riding a colt that had never been ridden before, and wondering what the reaction might be of the owners, and whether they might have me arrested for theft. In any event, they didn't do any of that. They just did Jesus' bidding. You see, they'd spent time with him, and they knew him, and they knew who he was, and they trusted him, and they knew he was their Lord, and they just did it. And of course, it was just as Jesus said. And then, of course, they entered into later the joy and the experience of that wonderful triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And then I thought about the owners, really, and these owners, I imagine them looking out the window and seeing these two random guys just untying their precious new unridden colt, and what they thought. And of course they came out and challenged the disciples, and when they were told that the Lord needed it, they just let it go, no questions asked, and let them take the colt. Now, we're not really told, but obviously Jesus had been in this area before, and this was where he'd raised Lazarus, and perhaps these people had witnessed that and knew who he was, and perhaps they became followers because of that or some other reason. But in any case, their hearts were prepared, and they did just what the Lord's bidding was in the same way. And I like to think that maybe they went along with the crowd and followed to keep an eye on their colt and to experience the joy again of that wonderful entry into Jerusalem. So the final preparations were made, and they started on their way to Jerusalem. And as they did journey, perhaps the disciples and the wider crowd of followers, and some of the crowd too, perhaps they remembered how he had raised Lazarus at Bethany nearby, and remembered how he'd often told them that he must go to Jerusalem in this way. Perhaps they remembered they did remember, we're told, they remembered the miracles and all the wonderful signs that he'd done. And they also perhaps remembered the ancient prophecy of Zechariah, who said that their king would come riding on the colt of a donkey, their Messiah, their king. And as they went down the Mount of Olives, they just became so overwhelmed with joy, and as they remembered all these things, that they really perhaps for the first time or in a deeper way than ever before, they knew who Jesus was. They recognised who he was, and they were just overwhelmed and burst out into loud praise and joy to worship the coming King. And they were shouting praises such as, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest." And the Pharisees, the ever-present Pharisees, of course, were there, and they heard this, and of course the people were proclaiming Jesus as King and as the coming Messiah, and this hugely offended the disciples, who saw this as a great blasphemy. See, these deepless religious men, although they should have known above all people who Jesus was, they should have recognised him and known by the signs who he was. They never recognised him. They weren't prepared, and they just wanted this unseemly racket stopped. Well, of course, Jesus said to them, he put them straight and said that very creation would cry out, the stones would cry out if the people were stopped. And in doing that, really proclaimed that what the people were saying is true. So just a few questions, really. Do I always respond to the Lord's bidding without question? Do I always recognise the King of Kings for who he really is day to day? And do I enter into that joy? Do I respond in joyful praise and worship as I ought? Or am I sometimes like the Pharisees, cool, calm and collected and critical, rational, respectable, religious, but missing all the blessings that he brings? Jesus entered Jerusalem in triumph, but he went there to die. In God's amazing plan, he was buried and then raised to life, and then he ascended back to heaven. And one day he's coming again in glory for his people. May we be those who remain always ready to receive him. Thank you.